Out There and No, another song of ascents. The psalm connects two big ideas: David's desire to honor God and God's promise to establish David's line. The theme here is when people commit to God, God responds with lasting promises. Lord, remember David. David made a strong vow. He would not sleep comfortably, rest, until he found place for God's dwelling. Okay? This refers to bringing the ark up and establishing worship. Prioritizing God changes how you live. Then we heard it in Ephrathah. Ephrathah. They found the ark and brought it to its place. Let us go to his dwelling place. Let us worship at his footstool. There's a focus on worship and God's presence among his people. Worship centers around God's presence, not just rituals. Then, for the sake of your servant David, God made a promise. One of David's descendants would sit on the throne, but there's a condition. If your sons keep my covenant, God's promises often include responsibility, okay? Then the Lord has chosen Zion. This is my resting place forever. God chooses to dwell among his people. God's presence is intentional, not random. Then we move to the blessing flows from God's presence. God promises provision for the poor, salvation for the priests, joy for his people. Then I'll make a horn grow for David, okay? This points to strength and future leadership. Enemies are covered in shame, but the king's crown will shine. God's presence produces both provision and purpose. What are key lessons from Psalm 132? First one is prioritizing God requires intentional commitment. Second lesson, worship is centered on God's presence. Third lesson, God responds to faithfulness with promises. Fourth lesson, God chooses to dwell among his people. Fifth lesson, blessing flows from God's presence. Final lesson, leadership and purpose are tied to God's plan. In summary, Psalm 132 reflects on David's deep commitment to establishing a place for God's presence and connects it to God's promise to maintain David's royal line. The psalm highlights the importance of prioritizing God and worshiping him where he chooses to dwell. God responds to this commitment by promising to bless his people, provide for their needs, and sustain leadership through David's descendants. The psalm emphasizes that God's presence brings both spiritual and practical blessings, and that his promises are tied to both divine faithfulness and human responsibility. Enjoy this chapter. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.